Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of My EdTech Life. Thank you so much for joining us today and making us part of your Saturday or maybe even Sunday, depending of where in the world you are. But we really appreciate you being here. And as always, thank you so much for making this show what it is today. Thank you to all our followers, our listeners, our viewers. I really appreciate it, as always, from the bottom of my heart, all the support that you give us, because as you know, this show is something that I love. It's about bringing educators, creators together, one show at a time. And today we've got an amazing, amazing guest. As you know, these Saturdays they've been for VR, for the most part. And everybody knows me that follows me on social media that I'm a big ARVR fan and advocate for it in education and in just in general in use. It's a lot of fun. It helps you be creative and so on. But today we've got definitely, I would say, an expert in the field, very well known gentleman who writes for VR Scout, other publications. He appears on several podcasts, obviously, and he talks about ARVR. And I guess you'd call him an ARVR influencer. And I'm just really excited to have a conversation today with a great friend, Bobby Carlton. Bobby, how are you doing today?
Hi, Fonz. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate that introduction. It's a very nice introduction. So thank you.
Oh, Bobby, you're very welcome. And like we were talking about earlier, I am a big, longtime follower, big time fan of your work, as your work for me really just helps inspire me as far as seeing things through that, at least that education lens, and seeing what we can do in education. Definitely future of learning, definitely future of work, and more than anything, to come at that lens of how to prepare our students for those skills. But, today we're going to talk about pretty much just a big, big, broad picture of AR/VR, and definitely through your expert lens as far as what it is that you're currently seeing, not necessarily in education, but the trends that we are seeing and where this may lead. So, Bobby, before we get started and we get into the conversation, if you can introduce yourself to our audience members that are just getting to know you for the first time, for our first time listeners also as well. Give us a brief introduction, your context in the AR VR world, and if you can, add one interesting thing about yourself that people may not know.
Okay, sure. My name is Bobby Carlton. And as Fonz mentioned, I am the executive director of immersive learning for a company called Ready Learner One, where we're really all about sort of reimagining how we learn. I'm also a writer for VR Scout. I've been writing for VR Scout since 2016. And that's really sort of just covering the trends and the evolution of what is happening in virtual reality, augmented reality technologies, how corporate companies, the gaming world, a lot of different things, and so that's sort of a wider gambit. I am also on the South by Southwest XR Pitch Advisory Board, so really sort of looking at what is happening in the XR community and sort of helping get those startup companies focused on XR technology, which really includes AR, VR, immersive tech, and help them sort of get noticed and get seen at South by Southwest, and where they can then pitch, what they're working on, obviously in hopes of getting backing. And for 10 years, I worked for Apple. I was running a program for them, more on the education side. It wasn't really on the technology too much, but it was more about reshaping higher ed education with Apple campus stores. So how that interaction between those two, and did that for a while. And as for a little known fact, a little unknown fact about me, um, uh, I I actually I'm still in a band. I've been in a band since 1992, the same band, and we signed to record labels. We put out records, went on tour. We did all this stuff, and lived the life of a touring rock musician, backed by a record label. And there's every horror story, every amazing story, all mixed in there.
Oh, Bobby, that is great. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for that introduction. And as far as Ready Learner One, we mentioned before, we do have some mutual connections there. Of course, we have Dr. Micah Shippey, and we have future doctor, in a couple of years, Doctor, or I'll call him future Doctor Jesse Lubinsky, who is there also. And they've been great friends too, as we've been part of the Google Innovator program and everything. So that is really cool. And just a little known fact that Jesse Lubinsky, I would call him my great, or actually he would be my grand coach, because my Google Innovator coach, Jesse, was her coach. So that makes
Ah,
Jesse,
some layers.
my
There's
yeah.
layers.
So it's the layers there, but it's awesome, and definitely just love the work that you all do. As far as that education, and I know that Jesse and Micah also are heavily into the world of ARVR, as well as Christine also as well. So that's wonderful. So Bobby, just before we get into all of this, and just so our audience members get to know you a little bit more, how did you get, first of all, into or immersed get immersed into the world of tech? And so take us to that trajectory. I know you mentioned Apple, and then a little bit more into, wow, that passion for AR, or that such heavy interest in AR that you have today.
Fonz, this is the nerdiest story you'll ever hear from me, at least. I don't know. It could probably get nerd. This is like the big nerd story. So, when I was a kid, I saw the original Disney movie Tron. If you remember, like it was like came out like in the '70s. Tron was like this movie. Who I can't remember his name. He stars in it. But I saw this movie Tron, and it was about this. And the antagonist of the film was the actual world, this virtual world. And so what happens is, this guy goes into this, gets stuck in this virtual world, and he's running around, and he's trying to survive sort of like these light cycles and these light tanks. And I was really obsessed with this imagery of like this sort of computer world. And I remember as a kid thinking, I wasn't thinking more about like the video gaming aspect. I wasn't thinking about like riding light cycles through this world, but I was definitely thinking about like how cool would it be to live in it, and what would that sort of idea of a computer world be like, where you like had a life. And so growing up, I used to draw pictures of like like get these neon crayons and draw pictures of these computer worlds based off of this movie Tron. And that sort of really opened up my exploration of like what would this be like. And so I started reading computer magazines, and I started reading PC Magazine, and really got into technology that way. And as I went through high school, uh, I really just sort of became obsessed with like sci-fi movies, and how Hollywood portrayed technology. And then when the thought of what VR was, like virtual worlds, came about, I really just sort of gravitated towards that. And again, I wasn't into gaming. I was never a gamer. I played them, but I wasn't obsessive about it. And I would just kind of dive into like, oh, virtual reality, like, oh, like how does the military is using 360 imagery to train pilots, so that's really cool. And I just kind of took these baby steps. And then from there, I had worked with Apple, and at the time, VR was like that thing you did on the weekend. It was my weekend like hobby. Meanwhile, I had this sort of day job in technology. And so when I was doing that and I was exploring VR AR, I had parted ways with Apple. And this was probably, um, man, this had to been like 2000, like mid 2000s. And there's this technology think tank, this guy, Elliot Mazie, who is considered this guru in sort of in a corporate education. He's well known, and you can Google him, Elliot Mazie, and he's done a lot of work into partnering with corporate education. But he approached me about running. He wanted to explore VR and AR as part of how would that change education. And he knew about the research I was doing, because we would kind of nerd out on weekends together. And so I was brought in, and I became the director of VR Learn, is what we called it, the program, where I did a lot of research and wrote papers on how does at the time, which was a very considered a very new technology, how does the VR change education and corporate environments? And from there, we were working with the military, we were working with different corporate environments, sort of on the exploration, and that's sort of how I kind of went through. I mean, I kind of shrunk it down a bit, but yeah, it really all started off, believe it or not, with the movie Tron. Like I was just obsessed with that movie, obsessed with that idea of having this computer assets like everywhere as part of your world, and what would that look like, and yeah, that was so yeah, big. I can nerd out about that forever. I could go on for a long time.
No, but that's awesome. It's always great. And my thing is, I always want to learn more about our guest. I mean, sometimes many people, we have audience members that may be familiar with your work, but do, they don't know where all of that came from and that inspiration. And for a lot of us, I mean, we've got Amanda and we've got Josh Tovar, Amanda Macias that are, longtime, fans and supporters and everything. And they're completely like nerding out right along with you with their comments, and we've got Josh Tovar here, who's a principal. He says, "You're este viejito como yo." I had the Tron shirts, so he had Tron shirts, and of course, Amanda Macias also. Tron is a catalyst that has
Yeah,
inspired so many of us. So that is awesome. So thank you so much, Josh and Amanda, with your questions and comments. And anybody else that's joining us live, please feel free to chime in with any questions and comments, for Bobby. And, as we talk about the world of AR, VR, and so many things. So Bobby, let's break this down too. For a lot of our audience members, a lot of my audience is they are educators. So, but I would like for us to talk just a little bit maybe about the difference, if you can explain. There's so many terms out there. There's AR, there's VR, there's XR, there's MR. So in your eyes and through your experience, just if you can give us some simple definitions on the slight differences between each of these terms.
sure. So and I'll even throw a monkey wrench at the end. So right, so virtual reality, right, is a when you completely cut yourself off from the real world and you put on a headset, right, like an Oculus Quest or an HTC Vive, and you completely immerse yourself into a virtual world, and that's VR, right? You're looking at digital assets. You're able to interact with them. Um, look in 360 environment, where augmented reality uses your real world environment with a layer of digital assets. So using like your phone, Pokemon Go is the best example of augmented reality. I think a lot of people know about that game. Or face filters, right? Instagram face filters, Snapchat face filters all use AR. So this is where it gets tricky. So XR, right? XR, extended reality, right? So that's the idea of sort of like, so if you go to here's the monkey wrench. If you go to Microsoft, the company, they call everything XR. So Microsoft VR, AR is all XR. They just say XR technology. Um, but sort of outside of that, XR is really sort of like the extended reality. So that can encompass, anything from AR with audio. It could be VR. It's sort of like the mixing of mediums, and then mixed reality again. Same thing, right? The idea of mixed reality technology, having an outside camera where you're mixing. You are in VR, but you see sort of what's happening in VR in the real world through a green screen or something like that. So there's a lot of loose terms depending on who you go to. It depends on what company you're talking with. So it's an interesting, yeah, it's an interesting world. And now, right, the metaverse is a just completely just like blew all that up.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we'll get to that in just a second. And also, like, I mean, my passion for AR/VR actually came from, I come back from 2018. It was TCEA, and that's when like Merge just like blew up like crazy. Now, I wasn't into it like right away because I didn't get to see them. I hadn't really heard of them. I had just barely become a connected educator in 2017, so it was all of that about that. But then all of a sudden, I see like a post like, "Hey, Merge cubes, like Walmart, $1."
Yeah.
I was like, I went to 3 different Walmarts and I bought them all out. Yeah, I just had to have them. I was like, I don't care. I'm going to share these. And even to this day, I think I have about maybe like 30 left or so. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll go to conferences and, people that connect with me and so on, I'll mail them some. And of course, now you can print out the little paper cube and so on. But, this is really cool. And so this was my very first introduction into ARVR through Jamie Donnelly. There's
Mhm.
Leslie Fisher also who kind of introduced this, but then Jamie, that her name was just everywhere. I got to meet her. I actually got to present with her also as well, and Rochelle and a couple of others. And it's just been so great to be part of this community and seeing things through the educator lens of what this can do to help a student not only just see a flat paper, but now you've got something that's tactile, something that they can move around, they can record themselves, they can give explainer videos, they can do all of those things. And so for me, as an educator, I'm always looking for the next thing that can maybe take some of our students to that next level of becoming content creators and not so much just the consumer aspect of it. Although there has to be a fine balance with even with the tech that we use. But at least in my eyes, and you can chime in on this, but Morehouse College, now I'm looking right now, my focus was K-12, but then now I'm seeing that higher ed is now kind of catching up a little bit to K-12, and they're kind of stepping outside that box. Now that
Mhm.
pandemic, everything's shut down. How are we going to engage our students? How are we going to draw them in? And Morehouse has done a phenomenal job. They've been all over the news. Morehouse in the Metaverse. I've had them on. What are some of the things that you're seeing now? And we'll talk just in the education landscape, and then we'll take that into the future of work. Through your eyes, what are some of the things, trends, and things, or just ways that ARVR is innovating what we're doing?
So it's interesting, first of all, when you brought up Merge, I mean, to this day will argue that Merge Cube is the best AR device out there. Just on for multiple levels, right? It's inexpensive, it's easy to get to, it's easy to use. And so, but to kind of answer your question, content is everything, right? A merge cube is no good if there's no if there's no content. AR, virtual reality, like you can have the best headset. Unfortunately, if you don't have the best experiences available, it's a paperweight. And so, oh hey, it's Alex VR. But the idea, right, is the trends that I see is this: we now have tools that people can access to build and create their own experiences. And I think that's going to be really big for virtual reality or augmented reality, especially in that sort of K-12 right environment, because we're now giving the tools to young people to build and to code. And those tools, we've moved away from sort of complex coding, and we're almost at that point of drag and drop, right? We're almost at that point where we can take a 3D image and drop it into the experience. And I think it's really something that is going to be important for how educators approach the classroom, right? Because no longer is the classroom's no longer going to be like, hey, here's like much like how we had here's a textbook, read the passage, we'll talk about it tomorrow. And then it sort of evolved with technology where here's an augmented reality experience through your merge cube. I was going to grab mine, I don't know where it is, through a merge cube, and I want you to check it out, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. To now, here are the tools. I want each student or each team to build their own. And so I think that's going to be that's a big part of and it's a small thing, right? It's tiny. It's but you're teaching kids a how to code, how to create AR experiences, and you're getting them to learn about AR. You're getting them to learn about interactivity and that ability to sort of tangibly hold a digital asset, right? And move it and interact with it. I think is a big part of that education, which they're going to take into learning in higher ed, into corporate world, into their social life, and as this technology evolves. And so for me, like right now, the current trend, right, is how easy tools such as merge cube, like give for AR content. Jig space is another tool, right?
Mhm.
That people can just download and on their app and build experiences. Zappar is another one. I mean, we're starting to see, Ijac is a great one. I use Ijac a lot, and then Spark AR and Snapchat. All of these tools are just right there on your desktop that you can grab and create content. And I think that's going to be a big part of sort of where AR VR technology is going to go to.
Yeah, and I think like you've hit on a lot of things. One of the things is just that barrier to entry is very low now. I mean, I was presenting at UTech 21. So, by the way, big shout out to Region 1, who did the conference, and I got to present. And my presentation is, augmenting the reality of learning, and really it wasn't so much like, hey, I'm going to give you these tools and that you can apply tomorrow, but it's really just to get teachers thinking about what is coming and and just getting them thinking about what's already there that they can try out on their own and experiment. And I just told them, I was like, just get clicky with it, have fun. And you
Yeah,
yourself as a teacher, once you start playing around with these, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I can bring this in for this lesson, or I can bring in for this lesson. And one of the easiest ones for them that a lot of teachers were very impressed with is just simply using the Google app, typing in, an animal. And I had a demo for them where I typed in panda, and then all of a sudden we bring in a panda bear
yeah,
who's just sitting there eating bamboo. And then I brought in a raccoon. So it's low barrier of entry. Students can get a little bit more of an additional layer. And the teachers can just add that additional seasoning to what they're already doing great. But now you're involving these technologies that maybe students did not know were there on their phone, or maybe they'd never really thought about. So I
yeah.
think that's something that is really cool and very interesting. And like you said, Bobby, it's that content creation. And I think right now, we're seeing content creators everywhere, and a lot of students are, hey, I
Mhm.
want to be like that YouTube guy, I want to be like that TikTok influencer. Well, they're creating content, and this could very well be some of the content that they create and they bring out. So that's really amazing.
Yeah, well, I saw Amanda made a comment, right? It's an authentic, right, learning experience, right?
Hmm.
It's just, and from start to finish, right? It's, I mean, again, when we sort of look at traditional learning, right? It's, there's a text. Here's the thing: I'm not here to downplay traditional learning. I think the future of education is always going to be a blended environment. It's going to build off of those traditions of lectures. It's going to build off textbooks, video and having students work together, but it's also going to blend in AR, VR, smart speakers. We're going to look at AI. Haptic feedback is going to be a part of it. Geolocation. I think all of those things are going to mix into sort of how we educate in the future, and even in today's world. But again, when we look at sort of education today, right? It's as simple as you open up a textbook and you read the passage, and which is fine, but you don't get that authentic, like building from the ground up, right? And the best part is you can build from the ground up and still talk about history, or still talk about science, and still talk about space exploration or math. And and as you're building out those things, you're getting a much deeper learning experience, a more engaging learning experience. And the problem that I always see with education these days is sometimes, and this is not me taking a shot at educators, but there are times there are educators who've been doing it for years, and this is how they've done it for years. And they're just kind of going through sort of what they know, which I get that. But there's a way it doesn't help the student, right? The students need to be involved. They need to be, that process we need to sort of, what I always call the curation ladder, right? You need to build the curation ladder. You need to get them on the rings and kind of step up and walk up and like grab this, grab the ring and be like, okay. And then you keep going as you learn more and more and you build up. And so that's something that I always feel like has been missing in education. Again, not because of I not because it's the educators are lazy. I just think because sometimes they might not have the resources. They might not know about the resources. They might not know about Merge Cube. They might not know about, that they can build their own Pokemon Go type of experience and launch it and give it to their students. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, in sort of that world. And I'm not just talking K-12. I'm talking through even corporate education. But the tools are all there. The tools are easily accessible, and we can build, an actual learning experience, and it's authentic, right? I mean, that's, I think, what Amanda said. It's an authentic experience, and I think that's really important to sort of really focus on. That it's not just sort of like a step by step. Hey, we're going to do this. This is something that students and learners just like, it's like a real type of learning experience.
Yeah. And one of the things that you hit on, and like you said, it's not like taking a shot at education, but and it applies for anything, not just education, but you said corporate and everything is just those words. It's like this is the way it's always been done.
Yes.
You know, this is the way it's always been done. And those are some of the most dangerous words that could be out there because then you've got that fixed mindset. But again, as innovators or early adopters too, we have a job or a duty also to slowly and introduce and just
Mhm.
make it known, make these tools known. And that's one of the things that I've loved that I've had the opportunity through my platforms to be able to share and create and just inform people. And that's it. It's just really all about informing and then having them get clicky with it and have fun with it and see what they can create and then start drawing that interest and even themselves as educators go through that curation ladder and then that will transfer to the students as well. And at least that's the way that I see it through my lens as far as education. I love that. But Bobby, we have a question here from Amanda. So Amanda is asking, Bobby, what are some of the barriers you're encountering through your lens? I know we talked a little bit there about education. This is the way it's always been done.
Mhm.
But what are some other things that you've been seeing?
Sure. Well, I mean, the biggest barrier that you're always going to see is just not a lot of knowledge about how technology works in those learning environments, right? I mean, that's one of the biggest barriers. The other part is going to be, I get it, right? People are always going to say in the beginning, right? We used to hear, VR is too expensive. Yes, it was. I mean, at one time, an Oculus Rift headset was like, $500, $400. The computer needed to run it was like, 1,200 bucks. It was expensive. And then of course we have the Oculus Quest, and we love to say the Oculus Quest is affordable. Yes, it's affordable, but it's not that affordable, right? Because you can't buy one for every kid. You can't buy one for every employee. So you're always going to have that barrier of financial investments in VR. I don't care, even if the heads come down to $99, you'll still have somebody or someone saying like, we just can't afford to do that. And then there's the time of getting people to understand what VR is or how to make it work, right? For every one employee or one student who's familiar with it, there might be one or two who don't. And so the sort of this getting people up to speed is going to be an issue. And so the idea, right, is to provide the proper training and education on how the technology works, how to right, how to blend it into your learning environment in a way that's not going to alienate people. And that's sort of like the one thing that we see in corporate world, right? And we also see it in K-12, right? That you bring a new approach of education, and both for the learner and the educator, that will new techniques will always alienate somebody. Now, for kids in the learning environment, they adapt. I feel like they adapt a lot faster. I have a 15-year-old kid, and she learns very quickly. They have the ability to sort of sidestep and change their approach. But again, you need to get the educator to be like, um, again, we go back to those educators who are like, hey, this is how I've run my class for the last 10, 15 years, 20 years. Um, and now you want me to bring in a VR headset, or you want me to bring in, you know, uh, let me figure it out, or let me, here's the thing, they even may be familiar with the technology. It's just a matter of they just don't have the strategy on how to bring it into their classroom. So there's always going to be barriers. And I think if we were to ask this question 10, 15 years from now, we're still going to have barriers. There's always going to be an issue with technology. Again, Wi-Fi will always be an issue. I mean, power is going to be an issue, financials are going to be an issue, getting, demographics of students, right? If you tell students everyone needs to have a VR headset, they're not every student's going to be able to afford one. So I think asking that's an interesting question because it dives into different layers, and I think it dives in um, different bigger issues, not based on education itself, but just issues in general with sort of the you know individuals and people. And I think it's again 5 years from now it'll be the same answer. 10 years from now it'll be the same answer,
Yeah.
and VR headsets are they're a device. Like you have to upkeep them. So
No, and and those are all great responses because it's true, Bobby. I completely agree with you. There's always a barrier to entry and anything because there's a learning curve. You've got to train people. And then oftentimes, by the time you're hopping on, the tech has changed. Now there's a
sure.
whole other version of the headset, and now there's a whole other version of the software, and then there's a whole other now who knows what other verse is going to exist at the time, and now you want to hop on. And I think sometimes, that, and that's one of the things, like for me, and like you mentioned, something like a merge cube. I'm all about simplicity, and especially in education, it's about keeping it simple because I don't want to overwhelm teachers with, use this app, use this app. And so oftentimes they go out and they do it. And sometimes it's like, man, this is so overwhelming. Why aren't the students understanding? Well, because the students need to get trained on those apps too, as well.
Mhm.
And it's just a lot of overload because there's so much information and, different platforms and so on. So we're going to run into those issues too as well, and
Yeah.
that's something that's continuous. But I think, like I said, the and Amanda even stated here, that's why it's important to have these conversations,
Mhm.
to just hear each other out, have a dialogue, and see, okay, what can we do? What is feasible for us? What's feasible for our teachers, for our students? We obviously know that technology is not going to go anywhere. Technology is going to be
Sure.
continually growing, and I often teachers that maybe thought that computers, back in the day, computers that'll never stick, and now it's like, oh man, computers aren't going anywhere, so I better learn, at least just how to maneuver and do all of that. But for me, oftentimes I think it's we don't give enough benefit of or benefit to our students that they can just take a piece of
Sure.
technology and are able to create. But as teachers, we also have to understand, and this doesn't go with just for teachers, but even corporate or professors, like, we don't always have to know everything, but we can
Mhm.
guide you. Let me be that guide for you. Let me show you what you can do and setting those expectations. And then after that, you just take off and roll with it, and you're learning together and you're building that community.
Exactly. And you know, I always, I will always argue that everyone's a different learner, right? I mean, there are people who are visual learners. There are people who are side by shoulder to shoulder learners. There are people who learn better through lectures or through reading text, right? So, so the learning environment's always changing, and what an educator in the K-12 space needs to sort of be aware of is they just need to know that they have other tools like available to them. If they notice a student just isn't connecting with the lecture, maybe a VR experience is the way to go for them, or maybe just a straight up YouTube video. I do know, like, for example, a lot of kids in today's, and I'm sure this is in a lot of schools, right? They get a Chromebook as part of their
Mm.
my kid got one. So again, Mozilla has Mozilla Hubs, which is a great virtual reality sort of web VR experience, right? It introduces virtual reality into the environment. It helps create sort of a virtual classroom. So again, we get those students who might be in today's world hybrid or in person, right? We now have a sort of a classroom feel for those hybrid students who are at home. And so using your Chromebook is a great tool, access tool for that. But yeah, it needs to change. Yeah, man, the change is the constant. Absolutely. Oh my God, change happens. It's like, even if it's not just the technology changing, it could be like a simple app changing. I mean, we saw this. We saw this years ago with textbooks, right? What version of the textbook are you using? Do you have, and we see this on the college campus, even talking about how students struggle with accessing technology. I mean, students are struggling paying for textbooks, right? And then they go online and they buy a textbook of the same title, but it's the wrong version. So we're always going to have like sort of an issue with how people access the tools, and so it's really up to educators to sort of be on the fly and be ready to sort of shift if they have to,
Mhm.
right? And sort of like be like, hey, how do we make sure that these students um, access the information we want to teach the easiest way. And again, what you don't want to do is have to teach them how to run technology, because that slows up the education process. Or all of a sudden, the workflow, the education flow is now disrupted by, well, I got to learn how to turn on, use the controllers, or put the batteries in the right way on my Oculus headset controllers, and you don't want to do that. You just want to be able to run your classroom, but you have to sort of be able to recognize when maybe a student, and I'm sure educators, and I've never worked in a K-12 environment, but I'm sure educators can see when a student is struggling, and they can say, hey, you might need extra help after class, or you might need, maybe let's try this type of thing, or maybe VR is the way to go for you. Again, there's this. It's all about just having the right tools available. It's like it's like your Batman, or Batgirl, and then you just have this utility belt of tools that you can just throw
Yeah.
out.
And like you said, sometimes it's just like improvising. I always like to say, and I always share this with people. My three words that help me be a successful teacher: improvise, adapt, and overcome.
Yeah,
So that goes with anything, and I think that goes with actually in any field that you can be in, because as something comes, change is inevitable, and sometimes, like you say, you just have to sidestep. All right, let's improvise, let's adapt. All right, let's get over this and let's go on and move on. But like you mentioned, it's a very important to gauge your learner. And of course, this goes with anything. As myself, I'm still learning. Right now my specialization is in educational technology for my doctoral program, but it's also about learning and adult learning and things of that sort. And then of course, being a teacher for 11 years, it was always just being able to personalize that learning and knowing your audience. And I'm going to share a story. When about couple of years ago, maybe about, well, definitely before pandemic, I think it was 4 years ago, when I got into this new role, they had asked me, being a former science teacher in fifth grade, they asked me to go into a classroom to help support some students. So I went in there and I just took my Merge Cube. And at the time, the Merge EDU app had already opened up, and you've got the little cards. And so it turned out that we were doing life cycle. And so I brought this in, I brought my phone in. I had air server that was just reflecting, on the projector. But I gave a young lady the cube and I said, here, check it out, hold the cube. And we went over the little life cycle lesson. And the students were just like, what? And just the look on their faces that they were able to visually see in a three-dimensional form this bird that's eating a worm, and then they're going through the life cycle and just seeing these things happen. It was just something that they were in awe of. So then I gave each little group a cube, gave them a little iPad, and the conversations that they were having. Now they're, one, I want to quote my friend Kim Murphy, who's also a great ARVR advocate. She said, this technology, the wow factor takes care of itself. As a teacher, you don't have to be worried about wowing your students with it. It already takes care of itself. You just really apply it in a way that's going to help that student be successful. Like you said, maybe the pen and paper aren't working, maybe the video isn't working, maybe they just needed a little bit more visual component, kinesthetic component, and something like for Merge Cube can definitely just boom, make that light bulb go off and really personalize the learning and make it that memorable experience that is now part of them that they can go ahead and continue on. And so I think that's something that's great. And Dr. Morris also from Morehouse College made a statement like that when I interviewed her. Said, what we're seeing is that our students that are now taking their courses are less distracted. Well, number one, because you have to have the goggles on so they can't see anything else outside their, picking up phones or anything. They're immersed in it. But now the learning is part of them that they can take it with them and do something with it, as opposed to sometimes the learning is just kind of like dumped in, but there's no connection, there's no tie-in, there's so she made that comment, and I think that's something that's great that we can see with the use of technology in many roles.
Yeah, right. It's the interactivity, right? Because you're now developing that sort of mental muscle memory of the experience, right? The idea like that you're moving, you're motioning, and that helps sort of sort of make that information stick to your head. And you talked about wow factor, so that not too long ago, and as part of that, and I want to sort of make a comment on the wow factor, and so this is something interesting. I actually talk about the wow factor a lot because the wow factor can also be not really helpful for VR AR, right? And especially, I know we're talking K-12, but um, in the corporate side, right, the wow factor exists. We deal with something, and this could happen in a school. So you go to a school, right, and you go to the superintendent, and they're just wowed by it. They're like, "Oh my, like, this is amazing," and they then say like, let's put our resources, let's figure out how to bring all this in, and without the proper guidance and without the proper sort of blending of that, it is a novelty, exactly, that that sometimes the if you're not approaching it right, blending ARVR into your education system could fail, right? If you don't know what you're doing with it, and now you've spent some money on it, and now that wow factor becomes this thing where you're just like, oh, like that was really cool, but we really didn't know what to do with it, and so now maybe we'll just not adapt VR AR into our education system. Maybe it's not ready, or maybe, and again, that comes from being caught up wow factor and then really not understanding how to then leverage that wow factor. And the other side of it is the wow factor absolutely goes away. It does. I mean, you're wowed by it. Now, what do you do? And so you need to sort of understand, how do I continue to, stoke the coals of the wow factor, right? We're not going to have that big blazing bonfire of the original wow factor, but we need to keep it going. We need to sort of keep it moving. And how do we continue to grow? How do we continue? And again, that's going to come from those tools we talked about earlier, right? Building your own experiences through, Jig Space, building your own experiences through, Spark AR, building fun face filters that can be shared with the students. So the wow factor, it's true. It can be a novelty. It can actually work against you. So you really know how, you need to know or figure out how to sort of continue to stoke the coals of the wow factor. Keep it burning, keep it going, keep it moving. So you always kind of have this like roaring fire of excitement going, with new technology.
Excellent. Well, Bobby, as we're kind of getting down into the tail end of the show, let's talk a little bit about some of the news that came out. Obviously, it's been all over the news with Facebook
Mhm.
changing all those things, and from your lens, you that are more immersed into this into the news and into this world. What implications does this have for all of us that maybe are familiar with Facebook or that use Facebook? What are the implications for us right now, and where do you see this taking us into the future?
Sure. So I would first want to say, so obviously, and just to kind of keep people, Facebook recently announced that they were really sort of becoming a metaverse company, and just this past week, or really last week, they had announced a slew of new tools that's going to help them pave the way to the metaverse, and sort of. When in the metaverse being how we approach education, how we approach work, how we approach socializing, entertainment, so just really sort of having a virtual life is what Facebook is sort of promoting, and obviously changing the name to Meta really shows what their intent is, right? That the metaverse is something that they want to be in. I want to first say this metaverse is Facebook's vision of the metaverse. So the metaverse already exists. I want to be the metaverse has been here for a while. We have virtual spaces like Rec Room. We have virtual spaces like AltspaceVR, Mozilla Hubs. I mean, there are so many other platforms. We have social VR components of games, Beat Saber, any type of, and we're already learning in the metaverse. So the metaverse that was talked about by Facebook is Facebook's vision of the metaverse. And I just want to kind of throw that out there. Which is slightly different than sort of what the metaverse is now. I mean, it's their branded version. I mean, them just kind of maybe putting a flag in the metaverse when it's like, wait a minute, there's already the metaverse. um, but what I do think is how the metaverse is going to change education and change. I I think we're far ways from sort of that vision. Even Zuckerberg had talked about it in his keynote that the metaverse isn't going to be here. His vision, next year, his vision is going to be something like 10 years from now. And even the metaverse that we know of today through Engage, which is another great platform, um, they're still working out their vision of the metaverse. I mean, everyone's going to have his own version, and just the idea of sort of unifying it. Um, I don't. It's not going to be possible. It's sort of like going to a different country, right? I mean, you just got rules in different places, and you just have to, it's just how it is. But the metaverse as an education tool and where it's going, I think it's as it evolves and changes, it's just going to make connectivity easier. I think it's going to make it's good. You can do things in the metaverse or in these virtual platforms that you can't do in real life, right? We can bring in 3D assets. We can pick up a car if we want. We can, bring in a dinosaur. We can transport students, and it's engaging, right? They're able to sort of have this experience instead of having to visualize it. They can actually see it with their own eyes, and they can actually grab things. And thanks to haptic feedback, it's this thing where we can grab things. What is Alex losing? Facebook's name such a negative connotation. I agree, Alex, that Facebook, right? I mean, that's the hard part. That's the part I always worry about. This idea of the metaverse is there is such a negative view of Facebook that people are just going to instantly associate, uh, you know, metaverse with Facebook, and then just be like, I don't want to deal with anything with the metaverse, and that is not good for virtual reality, in my opinion. But the metaverse now is an amazing place that we can be for education. I think as it evolves, I think as it changes, I think as the hardware changes, I think as young people in the K-12 space continue to build out their own experiences, right? I think that's what's going to be really big for the metaverse. And I think the metaverse itself, um, we're explorers right now. We're all Captain Kirk at this point, right? And on the Starship Enterprise, right? And we're all sort of exploring, and we all have our little teams of specialists around us, and we're off on our Starship Enterprises, and we're just kind of like carving out new space and new territory and looking to see what's out there. And I think the tools are absolutely there. And the creators and developers. I mean, VR is one of the fastest growing technologies we've ever seen. I mean, it is the fastest growing technology we've ever seen. I mean, if you go back to 2016, we were still using tethered headsets. So it's like here we are, 5 years later, and we have a slew of new hardware that it's doing mixed reality, or AR and VR. I mean, they're now looking like glasses, like with Ray-Ban stories. So I think, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, we are still at the beginning of what the potential of the metaverse is for education, and I think that we are in for an awesome ride ahead of us, but we still have a lot of work to do. I think, especially on the educator side, right? I mean, when you talk about sort of the classroom, the one of the biggest, I think, sort of roadblocks are the educators. I think not, for every one Fonz, there's 10 educators who just are struggling to understand it. And so we need technology to be more uh, classroom friendly, if maybe that's the best way to put it. And I think AR and VR could absolutely, though there's a lot of great experiences out there, I think there's needs to be more tools out there, and we need to give those tools to young people, because and those young people, as well as the educators, like teachers, need to be able to say, I would say, build out a very easy AR experience or VR experience using something like Jigspace or Spark, or Zappar or anything like that. So that's just my opinion. I think we're definitely on a great path. We're moving forward, but I just think we just need to sort of get educators on board more.
Yeah. No, and I agree with you and everything that you said. And I think the explanation that you gave was something that's great because a lot of people may not understand that. And I love the way that you said, like, oh, I just came here, I just put my flag and now this is mine. Like, it's kind of one of those things. But and I like the way you said, well, if this is the Facebook metaverse, now I want to go to this one. And it's like you're going to a different country, different rules, different things apply. All of a sudden it's like, oh no, you need a passport to come into this one, or you
Yeah,
need this to come into this one. And yeah, it's going to be very interesting. So I'm excited though, because again, this thing is something that interests me. And so I know I'm always going to be having my eye open towards the things that it can help us do for education. And you definitely described a lot of great things there. And so I'm really excited. So Bobby, thank you so much for all of your insight. But we're not done yet, because I know I want to share something that I use this app a lot also for content creation. But I'm going to bring this in because this one was a very nice clip that you shared. All right. So
oh,
everybody, here you go. This is Bobby's Ijac Godzilla. This is a Godzilla tattoo that he has. So check this out, guys. So I want to share this with you. I believe you're sitting at an airport, right?
no, I'm actually home in that
Oh,
one, I
you're at home
think.
on
Yeah,
this one. Yeah.
yeah. So
So
yeah, that's that. So I'm not a coder. I'm not a developer. I couldn't code to save my life. If someone said you need to code something, I'd be like, goodbye world. Where like this is the end of me. But again, just to show you, iJack was one of those tools where I could easily create an augmented reality experience using my own tattoo as the marker to launch it. And here's the thing: if I can build something like this, uh, uh, a sixth grader, a fifth grader can absolutely do the same thing. And it's like one of those things where it was, I went to, I think it's like ijackapp.com, or I think if you just Google Ijac AR, um, you go to a website and you literally just, it tells you to drag and drop your assets. And for the asset, I used a photograph of my tattoo to make the marker, and I just dragged it into the platform. And then it says add photos or a GIF or a GIF, depending on what part of the world you're in, and add the GIF. And again, I drag and dropped it. It then built the AR for me, and then gave me a QR code to scan use my phone. And then once I have that, I literally built that tattoo in probably, like, I gotta say, like, maybe 10 minutes. And this is someone with no coding. And I wanted to say something really quickly. I saw Amanda had made a comment about culture, right? Was played a big role in sort of, and I absolutely, yes, one of the biggest roadblocks. Culture is a huge roadblock, and that's a whole other episode I would love to come in and talk about, because I'm very passionate about sort of the how culture sort of obstructs the adoption of technology, and how heritage and cultural heritage, and it's like it's a whole other thing. I don't. I'll beg you to bring me on another day, and I'll talk about that. But and I only have a couple minutes, but yes. So, but again, iJack was one of those tools that I just easily jumped into, and anybody can do that. I encourage all of you to make your own, and then share it. I would love to see it.
yeah, so and that's wonderful. We're definitely going to have you back for a show again, hitting on this, because again, this is what something that I'm really passionate about, and this is really my jam, my world, and probably this is going to be my dissertation research too. So I'm kind of getting a head start on all of this and having you here. But like you said, something so simple as iJack. I mean, this is low entry. Teachers can use this. They can just get a little bit creative. You've got apps like Flipgrid. Flipgrid offers an AR piece as well, where parent or student can come in and they scan a QR code, and all of a sudden, video comes out, and things of that sort. So there are a lot of great apps that are out there, a lot of great platforms like Merge, CoSpaces, that educators that are very low barrier to entry. And more than anything, you don't have to worry about the students having to learn how to code or anything at all. It really just has become drag and drop, and this is something that we will for sure be seeing. And like I said, it also on my other YouTube channel at Tech Teacher 1381, I have a lot of videos where I do a lot of AR creation with Jigspace. Jigspace is one of my favorites. I was actually one of the projects that I did for one of my research classes, and wrote a blog about it and everything. And ARVR definitely does a lot of stuff that I am very huge fan of, and I can see, for business and marketing and sales, and more than anything, education too as well. But Bobby, we're not done yet, even though we will go over a little bit. No big deal. Amanda's definitely digging the episode. Thank you so much,
Thank
Amanda.
you, Amanda.
She's just a huge, she's a great friend and a huge advocate for tech, and I really appreciate her very much. So thank you so much. But Bobby, just a couple of questions that I love to ask towards the end for all
Mhm.
my guests, just to kind of end on a lighter note. So, what would you say your, well, I wanted to say edu kryptonite is, but let's go with, what would be your ARVR kryptonite right now? What is it that you're like, oh man, that just kills me?
Oh man, I gotta tell you, half-baked experiences are just like we're just like there's such a rush for putting content out there. Here's the I get it, like when you're in the classroom and you're just building stuff out and for fun. But I mean when I see these experiences that just they're published on the app store, whether it's Viveport or Oculus or Steam, and they're just sort of these half-baked ideas and people just kind of throw them out there. That's just always like like I can't, like there was this one game, I'm not going to mention it, the title of it, but the stills I saw looked amazing. I was like, oh my god, like, and it was actually this sort of like dystopian, sort of futuristic Blade Runner 20, like sort of look, like it was dismal, but it was like in this like futuristic technology world. And I was obsessed with it, looking at the images. And when I downloaded the experience, I was like, oh, it's like half finished, and that just kind of killed me. And I was like, and again, it was a bummer, and it doesn't help VR AR adoption, but it definitely made me upset that I spent the $20.
Yeah, no, I get you. I've had that experience also on Oculus, and I'll be like, "Oh man, this looks so cool," and then I get on there, and I'm like, "Yeah, this isn't
Yeah,
what I expected." I was like, "I want my refund. Like, this
yeah.
isn't cool, man." So, I mean, yeah, you're right. There's gonna be a lot of stuff out there that looks great, and then at the end, it's just like you said, half baked ideas that aren't really done. That people are just rushing to get out there and take advantage of the big boom in AR, VR, and with all the devices and with everything. So yeah, I just got to be very cautious and careful with that. All right,
Yeah,
Bobby.
bummer.
Next question: if you can have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
What would my that billboard? Oh man, I would probably just I would probably just put a picture. I have two dogs. I just probably put a picture of them up there, and it would just say like like these are my dogs. That's
I love it. These are my dogs.
that's
I love it. I love it. That's great, man. All right. And last question, Bobby. If this was your show, and of course you and I switch roles, what would be one question you'd like to ask me?
wow. This is I think I would, if this was my show, Fonz. I would ask you, what do you do when you're not doing this show?
What do I do when I'm not doing this show? Working on the show. And no, actually, a great question. And I usually ask my guests that, but what is it that you do to get out of your headspace and things of that sort? Well, when I'm not doing the show, number one, I'm thinking about like the show and what I'm doing. But recently, and I'm going to share this with you, I've kind of changed my routine, my daily routine, and it's just been a week, but I felt like a huge difference. And so my routine now, when I'm not doing the show, aside from work, my regular 8 to 5, but the morning I get up early, I do my walk, and I listen to a podcast. Then I go to work, do my thing, I feel great and everything throughout the day. But when I come back, when I wind down, I do another like 30 minutes of reading. So I'll be reading some books, catching up on news, things of that sort. And obviously, scouring Twitter and everything, and seeing what's out there as far as apps are concerned to go ahead and try out and just see what it is that is the next big thing in ARVR. And obviously, I'm always looking to experiment with things to see how, this can play a role in education. And so I've been fortunate enough to be able to connect with a couple of companies that I won't name, but I've been able to beta test some of their things because they're going from like the business world sort of, but they want to kind of go into education. So I'm just kind of trying some things out, seeing those things. So it's been a lot of fun to be able to do that and connect with people. So when I'm not doing the show, I'm still busy working, on things, but it's a way that I get out of my headspace, and but I love it. So and also just my wife is a huge blessing to me because she's like, she knows that I'm like a not even a 10xer, I'm like a 100xer, and she'll kind of reel me down to at least a 50x thought and kind of be, but she's very supportive, and that really helps out a lot because currently through my studies and everything, it's like we kind of have to, weekends are kind of like real short and stuff like that
Yeah, yeah.
based on studies. But I told her, hey, you know what? You and I got our masters. You and I are gonna get our doctorate because she's coming along in the journey. So, that's just me right there. That's what I do
That
for fun.
that sounds like a good way to do the weekend. And I do have a follow-up question for you,
Yeah.
Franz. If I were to visit you for one day, what's the one food in your city or town that you're like, you need to eat this?
The one food that you would need to eat. Okay. I would definitely take you to my favorite barbecue joint. It's called Smoking Oak, and they're located about 35 minutes away from where I am. But I know I can take you there, and you will probably have, some of the best brisket and ribs
Oh,
that you have tried south of San Antonio. And I can even say that maybe even compete with anybody that is out there in San Antonio and Austin too as well.
that's a bold statement, Franz.
You know what? It is a very bold statement. It really is, but I stand by it. I support my people here in my community. And, that barbecue place too has made it into Texas Monthly's top 50. So they're up there. They're up there. So, but I would definitely have to have you try that.
All right,
So, yeah. So, whatever it is that you want and you want to come down, we'll definitely talk VR, but we'll definitely be doing it over barbecue.
I'm down. Count me in.
Excellent. All right, Bobby. Well, thank you again so much for your time. I really appreciate this conversation. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
just your authenticity, genuineness, your knowledge more than anything, and the way that you are just keeping a lens, your open lens towards everything that is out there. And of course, sharing through VR Scout. I know, South by Southwest, you play a big role on that. And all the work that you're doing, I'm a huge fan. I did put your Twitter handle on here, but all of this information will be in the show notes as well. So if you want to connect with Bobby, connect with him on Twitter, connect with him on Instagram, through Ready Learner One. Just follow him. You'll see it on the show notes. And again, Bobby Carlton, thank you so much for everything today. It's been a wonderful conversation. Big shout out to AltspaceVR for joining us. Thank you so much. Amanda Macias, Josh Tovar, and everybody watching and listening to
Yes,
the
thank
show
you all.
later on. Appreciate you all. And again, my friends, as always, until next time, hey, stay techie, my friends.
Thank you. Thank you.